Our planet is experiencing a time of great upheaval, not just physically in terms of the undeniable effects of climate change, but also societally as people around the world attempt to find solutions for the challenges we've all inherited. As a researcher interested in how people communicate about geothermal power, a new form of renewable energy, I'm always asking questions like, what does climate change mean to most regular people? What do they think about how we should use our national geological energy resources? And how can they get more involved in these critical but complicated discussions? For the UK's first geothermal power plant, being built just outside Redruth in Cornwall, this meant speaking with Cornish people to find out their ideas about what was going on.
Do you know about any different kinds of renewable energy?
Apart from too many windmills going on, what about the solar panels?
There's solar, wind, is it hydraulic energy?
Solar power, wind power.
Hydroelectric, I suppose, was the earliest, wasn't it? Where water was pumped up and then let through turbines to form hydroelectric power. I can't think of many more. Tidal, perhaps, or something like that. But that's sort of like wave, isn't it? Sea power, basically. Yeah.
Well, you've got the solar thing.
Wave power. That's brilliant all around our coast. We are an island after all. We should be utilising that, shouldn't we?
Do you know what renewable energies are?
Ones that you can renew.
Yeah.
What about other renewable energies? Can you think of any?
I don't know. I keep getting phone calls about that.
Well, renewable energy. Well, yeah, wind turbines, water turbines.
Hydroelectric power is good, and subject to knowing what the costings are for developing a wave hub, that could also be good.
Yes, hydroelectric.
There's wave power, solar power, the wind power.
Got them on our roof at home.
Solar panels.
Excellent. And you have them on your roof at home?
There's the turbines and the solar panels, but I much prefer geothermal.
What do you know about geothermal power?
Hardly anything. Nothing at all.
Not a great lot. I mean, we got solar panels and things like that.
Can you tell me what geothermal power is?
No, go on.
It's power harvested from like places where there are volcanoes, and then it's taken and the heat is taken from it and it's used.
Is that power that comes from below the ground? Is that the hot rocks thing? Not a lot, so I just know hot rocks, you know.
Heat, basically, from the Earth's crust. So you drill down into the Earth's crust and put a material, I guess it could be water or something like that, and heat it up.
Oh, that's the hot rocks thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it's hot rocks.
So it's the hot springs from under the earth that come up to make electricity, biodegradable and all that sort of stuff. So it's really good stuff. It's coming up anyway, might as well use it.
Yeah.
Maybe you can answer together. They're questions about geothermal.
Oh my goodness, George, you'll know the answer.
Do you want to try and answer these questions?
I have no idea what that
Are
means.
you okay?
We know that it's the power that is sourced from the side of the earth, and it's about the heating of the stones. It has to be in a special ground, and it has to have a special system. But because we live where we live, and it's not feasible to do it with our house, so we don't know much more.
Geothermal power.
Yep, it's the production of hot water from drilling into rock underneath the Earth's surface.
No idea.
I would imagine it's something of heat under the earth powering something somehow.
Geothermal power is getting power from the land, I guess.
Right, geothermal power being like solar panels and stuff, or is it something else?
It's sent water down into the ground, heats it up, and then comes back out and goes around the turbine. But it's very basic.
They're boreholes, really big boreholes, and
Power from below.
Iceland's got a lot of geothermal power, I seem to remember.
It's the heat of the earth that's used to heat us.
and it powers your electricity and water and all sorts.
I did a degree in geology, so I know a little bit about it. I know they've tried it in Cornwall, and I think it works.
I think you drill a deep hole into the ground and you pull the power up, which I think they're trying to do with Penzance swimming pool.
Not overly sure what it is actually.
Not a pile.
No?
Nope.
No, that's fine.
I should guess that thermo is obviously heat, isn't it? And geo is from the ground, so heat from the ground.
Kev, well
I've got it now, look, I've clicked.
Do you know much about the geothermal power project that's happening at United Downs right now?
Not at all, not even slightly.
What about the United Downs geothermal power project? Have you heard of this before? Do you know anything about it?
No.
So what about the United Downs deep geothermal power project? Do you know anything about that?
No.
United Downs? No.
No?
No, I don't.
No, I haven't.
No, okay, so...
We know there's one in Redruth, Camborne area, they're going to do that, and then the Jubilee Park in swimming pool, which is in Penzance, was going to be, but I think they have run into a bit of rock problem, haven't they, in the structure of things, really.
And what about the United Downs project, the geothermal power project? Do you know anything about that?
Hadn't heard of it. I haven't.
Not a lot, not quite sure.
Know anything
Nope.
about that? Not a thing. I'd be interested to hear more. And the United Downs geothermal power project, have you heard anything
Not a clue.
about that?
Have you ever felt so stupid in your life?
No, not really.
United Downs?
Yeah, as I can see it.
Yeah, can you
Yeah.
tell me anything about that?
big.
Bright lights, quite big.
Would you be surprised to hear that geothermal power is happening here in Cornwall?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about why?
Because it's not really, there's no, like, I can't think of the word. There's no volcanoes or any tectonic hazards anywhere, so there shouldn't be any place where you can get geothermal energy.
Have you heard anything about it?
Nothing at all.
No, okay.
And I only live around the corner, so yeah.
I think that's a quite good idea. Although some people are a little bit because of they say it disrupts the Earth's. I can't explain it. It causes earthquakes. I don't know. I don't think it does myself.
That's not like fracking, is it? Not. It's going to cause any problem with the, sustainability underneath the rocks.
I'm really anti-fracking, but I don't think that counts as renewable, does it?
I mean, it almost feels like fracking in a way that does, doesn't it? So, but yeah, no, not really. I wouldn't really support that and be into that.
That drilling down and releasing water triggered the whole fracking, but I know it's not fracking.
Yeah.
That's a lot more aggressive.
Like, why don't I know about that? Because obviously I'm quite into this, like, renewable energies and stuff, and I've never heard of it, so...
Yeah, I don't like the sound of that personally.
Okay, can you
but
tell me a little why?
I don't know. I think they're probably resourced enough power as it is with what they've got already in Cornwall.
So it's naturally reheating everything,
Yeah.
which is, like, logical.
That's fine.
So why hasn't this gone further yet?
Quite a lot. I've just because I keep seeing it. I keep looking, seeing because it's again sort of 4.2 kilometres into the
And it gets warmer as you go down. So I don't know how warm it gets at 3,000 feet or more, but that'll be nearly 3,000 yards for you, 1,000 metres for you probably.
Yes. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, sound.
Yeah.
Depending on how difficult it is to drill 5 kilometres.
Is it supposed to power 3,000 homes or something like that? Is that the so yeah.
So, I mean, and the windmills are just popping up everywhere, and so are the solar farms. So no, it don't surprise me at all. I think they're going to do anything.
People were saying that wind power would never be a sustainable source of energy, and I think what's great today is to see how much wind power and how much solar power there is. So any new forms, although today they might seem like crazy ideas, 20 years time they won't be crazy at all.
Well, it would be sustainable. It wouldn't be, fossil fuel. It would be better for the environment, wouldn't it?
Renewable energy is the way forward, definitely.
Yeah.
No, I think it needs a bit more sort of exploring, to see if it is connected to the earthquakes.
Well, I don't know. If you've got mines, you've got a lot of mines in Cornwall and certain areas, you don't know what you're opening up, do you, and drilling down into. So.
Because we all know, like, when you start digging down, it does get hard, so what the hell?
It's a shame to everyone to be using electric cars and then be using like coal-fired or gas-fired power stations to power it when you've got all this renewables around us. So.
Well, with energy, with anything really, anything that helps save the planet. But
If it's something that's saving energy it's good for the environment, but then it's being put to us to save us money, then it's a good thing.
You can't stop progress, can you? And that's it. It's progress, so they say.
each area of Cornwall should have its own plant supplying its own local system. I don't know. You're the experts.
Well, if it's going to save the earth, you know, from whatever, you know, climate change, then I think, yes.
We've got global warming and we've got progress. We've got more people. We've got too many people than we need.
The future for our grandchildren, and we're getting quite worried.
Yes. We've got to look for something else. We've got to. Because there won't be a planet for our children or our children's children.
Yeah. Like, we could have been doing this years ago. I don't understand why we haven't.
I think it's really good, you know, that Cornwall's doing so much with renewable energy, and just it kind of adds to it, doesn't it, with the solar power and the wind power. Just, yeah, it's great, really. It's kind of like leading the way a bit, isn't it? So.
Whilst it was clear that most people had a vague idea what geothermal power was, they didn't seem to know much about what was happening at United Downs, just up the road from them, despite most of them seeming to think that geothermal was a pretty good idea. When I heard about a lady who'd worked on the original Cornish geothermal project, the Hot Dry Rocks project at Rossmanowes in the 1980s and 90s, I just knew I had to meet her to hear her ideas about what geothermal power meant for Cornwall then and what she thinks about it now.
Mankind is causing all of the Earth's pollution. Who else? There's only mankind here, and animals. Well, to a certain extent, animals too. But we won't go too deeply into that one. I know what I mean, and you probably do too.
I guess what you mean as well. But that's kind of our fault as well.
Yes, because we've got so many of them.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I always wanted to be a school teacher. I would have been had my mother not died when I was 15. I would have perhaps become a scientist, I don't know. 40 years ago, I started work at the Campbell School of Mines Geothermal Energy Project, and I didn't know if I was going to like it or what it involved. It was fascinating because I was learning all the time what was beneath our feet, which I hadn't realised. I hadn't realised that the rocks were so hot. I hadn't realised what the geothermal projects could do. I am not a geothermal scientist. I only know what I've gathered myself. Well, with temperatures rising everywhere, all over the world, what is causing global warming, as far as I am concerned, is the way we live, the fuel we use, and what's being used in cars and vehicles everywhere. And I cannot see that it can go on forever. We're taking all the fuel, oil, petrol, is all coming out from under our feet. And I don't think the people in the UK are the only culprits. Culprits isn't the right word. The only people that are causing pollution and problems. It's happening all over the world. Otherwise, it couldn't be heating up as much as it is so quickly. Coal mines are virtually finished. I don't know if they do produce any coal now. And oil is possibly coming to a similar position. I don't really know. And we can't keep cutting down trees and forests. People do need to change their attitude towards pollution, towards the fuel that we use, the way they live. But will they? I think half the world will, and the other half just ignores it. We can use oil and gas for as long as it is there for us to use. But when it's gone, well, there will be alternative sources of fuel. Geothermal energy is natural. It's using natural heat. There's no pollution involved. It was set up by scientists who knew more about the future and wanted to provide some alternative way of producing heat. At United Downs, they have to drill 2.8 miles to get to where the rock is hot enough to heat the water to the required temperature to come up and furnish heat and possibly more for homes and businesses in Cornwall. I understand that Iceland geothermal energy produces well over 80% of its heat and hot water. That is certainly very successful in my book. And if we can achieve such results in Cornwall, it would put Cornwall on the map. I think geothermal energy will help the next generation as it's helping our generation. It can only get better, and it can do a lot for Cornwall, I'm sure. I was asked, should we be responsible for keeping the planet safe for the next generation? And I think definitely, yes, we should be for the next generation and further generations too, if we could do it. But can we? If we can get all together with the same view, and we need to talk more to more people, then yes, we would get there eventually, and the next generation could look back upon our generation with thankfulness and whatever goes with it, and we could be thankful knowing from wherever we are, up there or down there, that they are safe.
Alison's stories mirrored in a lot of ways the things that people had said at Stiddians, that geothermal power had the potential to really make a difference, both to Cornwall and to the UK. However, in my research, it's important to hear ideas from lots of different angles, not just people in the public. So I headed back to the United Downs Deep Geothermal Power Project to meet with someone who has an up-close and personal relationship with geothermal power in Cornwall, and to get some insight from the geologist's perspective.
So, when was the last time you were here?
Last time I was here was probably the open day.
Which month?
March.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, a long time ago.
Yeah, long before the rig left.
Right.
And it's also weird because then the last time I saw the site without the rig was way back before you'd finished clearing it.
Yeah.
So even then,
It didn't look like this.
it didn't look as big as this.
No.
So, this is so cool.
Apart from the fact it's slightly flooded, it looks
Slightly flooded, with the steps into oblivion.
Yeah. Well, we probably once in a while will need to get down there and turn the handles. But
Obviously, it's taken quite a long time for the project to get to this point, from when you were very first involved with the project, right back in the days of Rossman Hours. Can you tell us a little bit about that process, kind of simplify in terms of what, from the very first idea of trying to get geothermal into Cornwall to today, where we're right on the cusp of it?
So there's a big chunk in the middle called Where Nothing Happened. So Roseman House really got going in a big way right at the beginning of the 1980s. That was a project operated by Cameron School of Mines, and it was looking at hot, dry rock geothermal energy. And right through the 80s, it was a big deal on the international geothermal scheme. It was a big project. The European Union, by that time, was funding 4 or 5 different projects that were very similar in 4 or 5 countries. It decided it wanted to put basically all its eggs in one basket. And held a beauty contest of which projects to carry on funding, and it came down to Cornwall or a place in France.
Right.
The one in France won.
Okay.
So at the beginning of the 90s, the funding stopped, essentially, and the research at Roseman House stopped in 92, I think it was. And really, for the next almost 20 years, nothing happened. I mean, there was very little interest in the UK in geothermal power. And then the whole low carbon, renewable thing started getting a higher profile again, and people started coming back to us and saying, well, what about doing something with the geothermal in Cornwall?
Yeah.
One of those companies stuck at it, and the concept for this project was developed in 2009, really. Initially a 3-well, 10 megawatt project was what we wanted to do.
On this site?
On this site. We acquired this site, we had planning permission for this site in 2010. And then spent 3 or 4 years trying to raise the money to begin, from oil and gas companies, energy companies, investment funds, mining companies, all those sorts of people. Couldn't get anyone to take the financial risk. There were lots of enthusiastic replies and lots of, we really like this, can we join in after you've drilled the first couple of holes, please? And there was a funding call from the European Regional Development Fund in early 2016, and we were successful in that application. Here we are getting towards the end of 2019, so it's 10 years that we've been trying to get this done here.
Yes.
And in the context of Cornwall, it's 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's been way too long. But we've known for a really long time that the rocks underneath Cornwall are really hot, and there's a resource down there that is environmentally sensible, sustainable, low carbon, renewable. Why wouldn't you want to try and harness it?
Yeah.
All over Cornwall. You know, it's not just here. The stuff, the granite, which is the key to this, underlies a good chunk of the county.
Yeah.
And if we can prove the geological concept and the technical concept that we're trying to prove here, we can go do it again in other places.
Yeah.
And it's a long road. It's not something that in 2 years' time there's suddenly going to be, you know, all the power Cornwall needs. But if in 10 or 20 years' time, you know, we've got 2 or 3 or 4 of these built and another few in the pipeline, and we're heading towards a sensible amount of power, a sensible contribution to Cornwall's power requirements, that would be fantastic. And alongside that will be a new industry. You know, we've already put quite a lot of money into the Cornish economy just with this project.
You've been involved with this right from the start. So what does this project mean to you personally?
That's a good question. My first job after I graduated was on the original hot dry rock geothermal program. I went to work there in 1980.
Yeah.
And so that's nearly 40 years ago. So to see this one work and prove the concept and prove the technology would be immensely satisfying. You know, I don't know whether in a few years' time when I've retired, you know, there are a stream of these things, whether that will happen or not, but I really hope it does. And, you know, I think we can take a lot of satisfaction. All the team here can. You know, this is not an easy thing to do. And we haven't answered the final question yet about United Downs, but we've accomplished quite a lot. And even to have done that without upsetting the community we're in, and actually bringing the community with us and getting more and more support and enthusiasm from them has been great. So yeah, it will be, I'd find it personally very satisfying if it comes off.
Yeah. What would happen if it doesn't work?
I think it depends what version of it doesn't work.
Yes.
It is. You know, it's very likely to be either a success or a complete failure. There's a lot of ground in between that. It's going to come down to how our underground system behaves. You know, that's what we need to figure out in the next 6 months, is what our fracture system looks like, how much water can we get through it, is the heat transfer area big enough?
Yeah.
And there'll be a whole bunch of degrees of success or failure in there. So I think we will have something we can produce energy from.
Yeah.
If it's not as much as we hope for, well, okay, we move on and try and do it better next time. We're giving ourselves 2.5 ticks out of 3 at the moment. We started off with 3 big uncertainties really. Would it be hot enough?
Yeah.
Would the fault structure that we were targeting be there?
Yeah.
Where we expected it to be?
Yeah.
And then would it be permeable enough? Get enough permeability to get the water through the rock. So yes, it's hot enough. Yes, the fault structure's there. Half a tick for permeability because we've done an injection test which was really promising.
Yeah.
And we're quite hopeful about the productivity, but we haven't proved it yet.
Great.
So that's the last remaining half a tick for us.
Yeah. That's awesome. Can you explain a bit about what all of, like, because these two look very different to me as well, right? How deep did this one get to at the very end?
Okay, so you are standing. You can actually stand on.
Oh my gosh.
So this is the deepest hole drilled on land in the UK. So it's 5,275 metres deep.
Yeah.
It's vertical for the first 3,500 metres, and then it gets seared off in that direction.
Yeah.
And the bottom of the hole is 700 metres over there. The stuff you see here is basically just valves. Everything below the grid is to do with the permanent installation that seals the casing. So as you know, we drill a bit of the hole and then we steel line it, we case it.
Yeah.
That casing has to be fixed to something at surface, which is called the wellhead.
Yeah.
So that's built up in sections. The bit above here is basically just valves.
Yes.
So at some point we need to get access to the hole to put a pump in it or to run tools into it, and so there's just a small valve here and a big valve here is all that is. And the shallower well over there, I tend to couldn't call it shallow, it's still 2,500 metres deep.
Yes.
Basically the same thing, 2 big valves on top. looks the same at surface, and at some point we will hook up the injection side to that set of valves.
So the thing that I noticed on this one as well is you've got a little dial at the top. What's the dial
It's a pressure gauge.
Yeah.
It's a safety precaution because we've done a lot more testing in that one than this one.
Yeah.
And it's really only that if we open these valves, we can check that there's no pressure on it.
Right, okay,
before
so it's not going to blow out.
Yeah.
I always think about the development of this industry within Cornwall and the way that Cornwall really kind of has embraced renewable energy technologies in all of their different forms. What do you think it means for geothermal development in the UK that it is here in Cornwall, except for the geology? I mean, obviously the geology means it has to be here, but...
Well, I think the geology means it needs to be here to start with. I think if we prove this, I think it will spread up. I think the first thing that will happen is Devon will say, "Oh, okay, well maybe we'd like some of this too."
Yeah.
And the geology in Devon is fine. They've got granites too. You can do this in other places in the UK as long as the geology is right. The temperatures won't be as good, so you'll have to drill slightly deeper holes, but that doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah.
I think for the rest of the UK, heat projects are more likely than power projects, and the government is quite interested in renewable heat. It's not really very interested in renewable electricity, and one of the arguments against this has always been, well, no matter how successful you are, you're never going to solve the country's electricity supply problems, are you? This country is not a geothermal country. It's not. People aren't familiar with it, and it isn't yet a district heating culture either.
Yeah.
And elsewhere in Europe, geothermal and district heating goes together brilliantly, and could here too. It needs to be mostly for new developments. Retrofitting district heating schemes and geothermal power plants in existing places is pretty difficult and expensive and disruptive. And the other thing about heat and power for geothermal against some of the other renewables is you start these things up and they run 95% of the time. You have no intermittency, which you do with wind and solar, obviously. So those are great. I'm not knocking those, but geothermal does a slightly different job.
Yeah.
And contribute to baseload supplies that in a way that the others can't.
Yeah.
For power generation on this site, we're planning to produce water at about 170, 180 degrees centigrade. That's our target. And if we produce that at the flow rates we're talking about, there's our 3 or 4 megawatts.
Yeah.
But these are really deep holes and really expensive holes.
Yeah.
But if you want to produce water at, say, 80, 90 C or 100 C to go into a heat centre for a district heating scheme, then, this kind of depth well is fine, down to 2.5 kilometres. So that changes the economics completely. One advantage of this, hopefully, is that if this concept works, this is repeatable in lots of places because there's granite all over Cornwall and there are these fault structures all over Cornwall. I think once the idea gets people, you probably know yourself, you sit in a room with 50 people and give them a 20-minute talk on geothermal to people who've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
And at the end they go, well, that's a good idea. Why don't we do that then? It's an easy sell in the sense that it's a kind of obvious thing to do.
Yeah.
It's quite a difficult thing to do and quite an expensive thing to do. So that's why we've been taking so long to get to where we've got to.
Doing research on Cornish communities and how they talk about geothermal power has led me into many interesting conversations with a whole range of different people, from geologists talking about the many unique forms of granite to Cornish residents explaining why the mining history of their county is such a source of pride. But one thing above all is clear. This is a county full of people who love where they live, but also think that Cornwall can make a difference, and many of them believe that geothermal is the way to do this. Whether geothermal power does become a larger industry in Cornwall is something that only time will tell, but it will not be for the lack of passionate and environmentally conscious people trying to use Cornish resources for the good of one and all.